A Second Chance at Love. Previous episodes are available in playlist. A link is given in the video description. Episode 30. Before Roxanne could say anything, the man continued. Besides, you did send the flowers back to my office, didn't you? Do you want to know how my staff talked behind my back? Lucian said it matter-of-factly. His reply rendered Roxanne speechless for a moment. After a short pause, she gritted her teeth and retorted. That's because your action has caused inconvenience to me, Mr. Farwell. Lucian let out a baffling laugh. Your action has caused me inconvenience too, Ms. Jarvis. Lucian Farwell. Roxanne called out his name with a raised voice. You knew what I meant. Lucian's expression turned grim as he responded in a solemn voice. You knew my intention as well. Why wouldn't you give me a chance? Their conversation kept hitting a deadlock. Roxanne pressed her lips, remaining silent for a while. After regaining her composure, she said calmly, Let's meet and talk it out. She had to think of a way to end this quickly as she did not want to play this with him anymore. Game. Upon hearing that, Lucian arched his brows, surprised that she would want to meet up with him. But it seems she just wants to turn me down in front of me. The man pursed his lips as he agreed, Sure. You decide the time and place, then. Roxanne acknowledged at once. After ending the call, Lucian returned to the conference room. However, this time, he looked less intimidating. Those who talked behind his back immediately zipped their mouth, looking all businesslike once again. Let's continue, Lucian ordered. With that, someone stood up and continued with the meeting. During the meeting, Lucian's phone started blinking again. Arching his brows, he glanced at the screen, noticing the text from Roxanne. She told him to meet her at a cafe near the research institute during lunch break. The people in the meeting noticed the tension on Lucian's face had eased after he looked at the phone screen. In fact, he seemed to be in a good mood by the time the meeting ended. It was already noon when he left the conference room and returned to his office. Glancing at the time on his watch, Lucian felt concerned about the meeting with Roxanne, as he had not thought of what to say later. Their meetings in the past had ended on a sour note, and Lucian knew things would not get better this time because Roxanne was determined to reject him. Of course, Lucian would not let things go her way. Feeling vexed at the thought of the intense exchange that might happen later, he decided to give Jonathan a call. It did not take long for Jonathan to answer his call. Yes, Lucian. How can I help you? Lucian replied in a deep voice, I'll be meeting her later. It was almost noon, but Jonathan had not been able to come up with a solution. He could only advise Lucian, whatever you say or do, remember to tone down your attitude. Don't confront her head-on. Lucian frowned but acknowledged at once. After ending the call, Lucian went downstairs and drove to Roxanne's research institute. In the meantime, Roxanne got up, ready to depart to the cafe when most of her staff had left the building. Before stepping out of the research institute, she stopped in her track as something popped up in her mind. She then returned to her office to retrieve the roses. I might as well give him back the flowers since I'm meeting him. She was relieved that no one saw her walking with a bouquet of roses. When Roxanne was about to walk to the car park after leaving the research institute, she saw a Bentley at the entrance of the building. Hearing that, Jonathan froze for a moment, but he soon realized who Lucian was talking about. So, I suppose you've made good progress? Jonathan asked in surprise. Lucian said frankly, she's planning to reject me. His reply left Jonathan speechless. Did Lucian do anything wrong? Why does Dr. Jarvis keep on rejecting him? Had the person involved in this been someone else, Jonathan would have advised him to give up. However, since the center of the drama revolved around Lucian and Estella's biological mother, Jonathan had no choice but to come up with ideas to help Lucian out. Yet, Jonathan Noticing her from a distance, the man immediately got out of the car and walked toward her. Roxanne's expression stiffened when she saw the man coming in her direction. Didn't I tell him to meet me at the cafe? What on earth is he doing here? It's as if he's still unhappy with the damage done when he sent the bouquet over this morning. It's noon now, so I feel we should have a proper meal instead. That's why I came here to fetch you, Lucian explained as if he knew what she was thinking. Upon hearing that, Roxanne snapped back to reality. With a frown, she responded, "No thanks. Let's just grab a quick coffee." She wanted to avoid having lunch with Lucian because she did not want to spend more time with him. However, Lucian acted as if her words fell on deaf ears as he continued, "What would you like to eat? I'll reserve a table now." Roxanne gave him a puzzled look. She was unsure if her mind was playing tricks on her, but somehow, she felt Lucian looked slightly different from how he used to carry himself. "That won't be necessary. I don't feel like eating. I'm asking you out so we can clear things up once and for all." Roxanne reiterated her motive icily before giving him back the bouquet. "Your flowers. Please take it back." Lucian, who was busy scrolling through his phone, froze instantly. He lifted his eyes and looked over. A hard glint flashed across his eyes. When he noticed her carrying the bouquet from a distance earlier, he had already expected her to return the flowers to him. However, he intentionally diverted her attention so that she would forget about the flowers. Should that happen, he would be in a foul mood. Yet, the woman was not going to give up easily. Inching closer, she placed the bouquet in front of him. "Here." After a standoff, Lucian finally reached out his hand to retrieve the flowers with a deadpan expression. "I'm sad that you refused to accept the bouquet. To make it up to me, please have lunch with me." Roxanne studied his expression but did not see a hint of sadness on his face. "I'm sorry." When she was about to reject his offer, Lucian interrupted, "I didn't have breakfast this morning. My stomach is growling now." He started frowning while playing the sympathy card. "You want me to drink coffee with you on an empty stomach, Ms. Jarvis?" As his words fell, Lucian gazed into the woman's eyes. He came out with the idea on the spot. According to Jonathan, resorting to tactics that could tug at her heartstrings might work. In the past, Lucian would have looked down on such a dirty trick, but the woman's attitude left him with no choice other than to resort to this tactic. Upon hearing that, Roxanne hesitated for a moment. Swallowing her words, she sized the man up while knitting her brows. Given Lucian's background and stature, he never had the need to put up a front with anybody. Still, he had learned how to control his emotions and facial expressions, having been in the corporate world for so long. Roxanne thought he was really feeling unwell when she saw him frowning. Lucian raised his brows slightly and casually placed one of his hands on his stomach. Roxanne continued sizing him up for a long while. I stayed with him sir years ago, and I never knew he had gastritis. That being said, I don't think he's just acting. Is he acting weird because he's experiencing discomfort in his stomach? Otherwise, why would he suddenly change the venue and decide to have a meal instead? Yes, that might be it. Roxanne dispelled her suspicions and agreed to the suggestion through gritted teeth. I've failed to consider your situation, Mr. Farwell. Since you're not feeling well, you should decide what to eat. Lucian relaxed the hand he had on his stomach and flashed a subtle grin. I've already made a reservation at a restaurant. Hop in. Upon hearing that, Roxanne couldn't help but frown and question her own initial judgment. Lucian didn't give her much time to respond. He spun around and opened the car door for her. He was holding that bouquet of roses and waiting for her at the car door. Roxanne froze when she saw that. Subconsciously, she turned to check her surroundings. Lucian was standing straight next to his luxurious car and holding a bouquet of roses. A scene like that could easily lead to misunderstandings. Roxanne heaved a sigh of relief when she saw no one nearby. She then shifted her gaze back to Lucian and smiled. You can lead the way, Mr. Farwell. I'll drive myself. With an arched brow, Lucian uttered, Ms. Jarvis, if you don't hop in, someone from the Research Institute is going to see us when they come back. Don't blame me if they misunderstand us. In other words, he would keep standing there until Roxanne got into his car. Roxanne pursed her lips in response. He's blackmailing me, yet I have no choice but to hop in. If someone really sees this, how am I supposed to explain myself? To her surprise, Lucian shoved the bouquet back into her hands the moment she got into the car. Roxanne stiffened and glanced at Lucian. What is he up to? Please hold on to it, Ms. Jarvis. I don't want the bouquet to stain the seats. Lucian said casually, then walked over to the driver's side and got into the car. Roxanne held the bouquet in her arms throughout the journey to the restaurant. She was overwhelmed by mixed feelings. Lucian didn't know what to say either, so there was dead silence in the car. Almost half an hour later, the car slowly came to a halt outside a restaurant. Lucian opened the door and got out of the car. Only then did Roxanne snap out of her daze. He was about to reach out to open the door when it opened from the outside. Lucian had a calm expression on when he opened the door for her as if that was the most natural thing to do. That unequivocally took Roxanne by surprise. Why is he acting so strange today? At that moment, she did not know if she should get out of the car. There were servers waiting at the entrance. They were waiting for Roxanne to get out of the car so that they could lead them into the restaurant. Seeing that there were people waiting, Roxanne endured the awkwardness and alighted from the car. After getting out of the car, Roxanne wanted to return the bouquet to Lucian, but the man had already turned and walked into the restaurant. Seeing that, Roxanne had no choice but to hold on to the bouquet. Just like that, they walked into the restaurant one after another. Quickly, the server led them to the table Lucian had reserved. For some reason, Roxanne felt weird about the situation. A lot of the patrons were sneaking glances at them because of their looks and temperament. Aware of the crowd's attention, Roxanne scanned the surroundings in puzzlement. Seconds later, she finally realized what was so weird about the situation. "We look like a couple, and we look out of place." She was irked when she heard the server saying, "This is the most popular couple set meal in our restaurant. Would you like to try it out?" Lucian didn't correct the server. Instead, he agreed to have the set meal and went on to order some side dishes. Upon hearing the conversation between Lucian and the server, Roxanne suddenly came to her senses. With a frown, she looked at Lucian before turning toward the server and explained, "There seems to be a misunderstanding. I'm not his." Before she could finish her sentence, the server looked at her enviously and said, "Miss, those flowers are beautiful. You're so blessed." Roxanne was stunned. When she wanted to continue explaining the situation, the server had already walked away. The other diners were still looking at her. Roxanne felt rather uncomfortable with the crowd's inquisitive gazes. She couldn't help but ask, "Why did you pick this restaurant?" Lucian gave a small smile and answered, "I was craving the dishes here." Roxanne frowned when she heard that. She wanted to question him further, but the server was already serving the dishes. Left without a choice, Roxanne fell silent. A troubled look appeared in her eyes when she saw the set meal for couples. Lucian, who was seated across from her, saw the look in her eyes. His expression turned gloomy when he saw how troubled she looked. Hence, he kept mum and started eating. Roxanne was concerned about his gastritis, so she didn't say a word when she saw how focused he was when he ate. A while later, she saw that Lucian was almost done with his food, so she said, "Mr. Farwell, it's getting late. I think we should get right into business." Lucian paused and knitted his brows. "What do you want to say? Please stop sending me flowers. I don't like them, and I don't think it's appropriate." Roxanne lowered her gaze to hide her emotions. Lucian stared at her and asked, "Then what do you like if you don't like flowers?" Roxanne was stunned. She quickly regained her composure and cast him a confused glance. "Lucian is a smart person, so I bet he knows what I meant. Why did he ask me that anyway? What exactly is he up to?" Roxanne didn't dare to think too much about it. She clenched her fists to keep her cool. "That's not your concern, Mr. Farwell. We're not that close. Please mind your actions and don't put me in a tough spot." Lucian's gaze darkened when he heard how determined she was when she rejected him. Roxanne pursed her lips and looked at him, hoping to get the answers she wanted. After a while, Lucian asked in a deep voice, "I'm not married, and neither are you. How am I putting you in a tough spot, Ms. Jarvis?" Roxanne could barely keep her emotion in check when she heard that. She furrowed her brows and said, "If I remember correctly, it was you, Mr. Farwell, who reminded me often to keep the kids in mind." Lucian seemed unfazed. "I was just reminding you to stay away from those weird men." Roxanne could not wrap her head around the man's behavior. "Who do you think you are to me, Mr. Farwell? What makes you think you can interfere with my private life?" Lucian scrunched up his face. In the next second, he uttered bluntly, "I'm telling you as someone who's trying to court you. Is that enough?" Roxanne was taken aback. She thought her ears were playing tricks on him. "What did you say?" Lucian knitted his brows. Since he had already revealed so much, he didn't mind telling her more. You heard me right, Ms. Jarvis. I like you, and I want to pursue you. Roxanne was still confused when she heard him repeating himself. After keeping silent for almost a minute, she shook her head in amusement. She had heard him clearly, but she found Lucian's words ironic. Mr. Farwell, don't you remember what happened 6 years ago? Don't you think it's a bit too late for that? Lucian, with a darkened gaze, recalled what had happened when they were at the resort. His heart sank when he remembered how Roxanne looked when she was drunk. I remember, and I regret it, okay? Roxanne stared at him for a few seconds. She was getting moved by how serious he looked. However, she quickly recomposed herself and asked in a cold tone, "What about Ms. Pearson? Is the marriage contract of 6 years between both of you just a lie, Mr. Farwell?" Regardless of 6 years ago or the present, Aubrey was still a barrier between the both of them. Lucian's expression turned solemn when he was reminded of Aubrey. I don't care if you believe me or not, but I never wanted to marry her. There are still some private matters I need to settle with her. Just give me some time and I promise I'll give you an explanation you'll be satisfied with. Roxanne's mind went blank when she heard that. Sir, years ago, Lucian was so keen on being with her. Now, she sounds like a problem to him. Roxanne didn't know if he was telling the truth, but either way, she felt like a joke when she recalled what she had gone through 6 years ago. At that moment, events from 6 years ago flashed across her mind like a slideshow. She found the situation more and more ironic. After a long while, she asked calmly, "Are you doing this because Essie doesn't like Ms. Pearson?" Lucian frowned and looked at her confusion. "I know you love Essie deeply, Mr. Farwell. But I didn't expect you to make such an enormous sacrifice just so that Essie could have a mother she likes. I'm surprised you would offer someone the status of being your wife." Roxanne raised her head and looked at him calmly. "You don't have to beat around the bush and say anything that violates your will, Mr. Farwell. You've already made yourself clear last time on the phone. You only choose me because Essie likes me." Although it sounded as though she was trying to tell Lucian oil, Roxanne was actually trying to convince herself to stay away from him. Lucian's gaze turned even more solemn as he stared at her. "Yes, I like Essie a lot, but that doesn't mean I'm willing to marry you." Without giving Lucian a chance to answer her, she added, "What happened 6 years ago is still fresh in my mind. I don't wish to make the same mistakes. You shouldn't trouble yourself anymore, Mr. Farwell." Roxanne sounded anxious as she spoke. She could sense Lucian's intense gaze on her. Fortunately for her, she managed to say whatever she wanted to say. Lucian stared at her for a long time, and he thought of explaining himself. However, he changed his mind when he heard Roxanne's last sentence. "I did her wrong 6 years ago, and I've hurt her. I can't blame her for not trusting me. No matter what I say, I doubt she'll listen to me now. In fact, she might even think I'm making excuses for myself." At that thought, Lucian said, "I was wrong for using Essie as an excuse. Regarding my feelings for you, I think you'll see my sincerity in due time." Roxanne had never seen this side of Lucian, so she didn't know how to react at that moment. Meanwhile, Lucian had already gestured for the server to bring him the bill. When they left the restaurant, Roxanne was still in a daze. "Miss, your flowers," the server called out just as they reached the entrance and ran toward her with the bouquet. Roxanne snapped out of her daze and remembered that she had gone in with the bouquet in her arms. When she turned around, she saw the server panting lightly. With the bouquet in her arms, the server looked at Roxanne enviously and said, "Don't forget about your flowers, miss." Roxanne shifted her gaze toward the bouquet. By then, the server had already reached out to pass her the bouquet. Seeing that, Roxanne had no choice but to accept the flowers and thank the server. The server beamed. "No worries. You guys look like a match made in heaven. I hope the both of you will stay together forever." With that, the server waved her goodbye and rushed back into the restaurant. Roxanne held the flowers and watched as the server left. Her mind had gone blank, and she had even forgotten to explain herself. Standing not far away, Lucian had been paying attention to the interaction between the ladies. When he saw Roxanne's expression after the server left, his lips curled into a subtle smile, and his expression wasn't as grim as before. Roxanne stood unmoving for a while before she eventually turned around and walked toward him. After they got into the car, Lucian revved up the engine and drove to the research institute. None of them uttered a single word throughout the journey. When they arrived at the entrance of the research institute, there was no one outside, as it was working hours. Roxanne got out of the car and wanted to leave the bouquet on the passenger seat. As she was about to do that, Lucian said in a cold tone, "If you don't like the flowers, you can dump them." Roxanne frowned at the man in the car. With a straight face, Lucian added, "As I said before, I don't want the car to smell weird. Besides, it's bad enough you've sent the flowers back to my office, Ms. Jarvis. If you reject them in my face, it'll be too hurtful. If the flowers bother you so much, just dump them, Ms. Jarvis." Having said that, he leaned over to close the door without giving Roxanne time to react and drove away. Roxanne stood frozen to the spot with the bouquet in her arms. Thinking about what Lucian had said to her, she glanced at the flowers, and a torn look descended upon her face. After mulling over it, Roxanne ended up bringing the bouquet back to her office. She didn't do that because she accepted Lucian's gestures, she just didn't want the fresh flowers to go to waste. That was why she had decided to send the flowers back to him prior to that. "I wonder what Lucian did with the flowers I sent back to him. Did he throw them away as he told me to?" When she was lost in her thoughts, someone suddenly knocked on her door. Roxanne came back to her senses and told the person to enter. Seconds later, someone pushed the door open and walked in. At the sight of the visitor, she asked in puzzlement, "What brings you here, Mr. Damaris?" Jack smiled and answered, "I was in the area, and I heard you're here, so I decided to come and see how you are doing." "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Damaris. I'm much better now." Jack nodded and entered the office. As he walked in, he sized up the surroundings. Upon seeing that, Roxanne grew anxious, and she subconsciously glanced at the bouquets she had left on the couch. She had wanted to put them in a vase, but she had been distracted and left them on the couch. She didn't expect Jack to show up unannounced. Although she knew Jack wouldn't know who the flowers were from, she still felt embarrassed. "Oh? What do you have here?" Jack's gaze fell on the flowers, and he looked at Roxanne. Roxanne was a bundle of nerves, but she tried her best to appear calm. "I received them this morning. I don't know who sent it. The deliveryman has most probably gotten the wrong address." Jack raised his brows slightly and sized her up when he heard that. What a lame excuse. Roxanne steeled herself and met his gaze, smiling faintly. Jack chuckled when he saw how she looked. Instead of dwelling on the matter, he said, "They seem to be freshly picked." "What a thoughtful sender." Roxanne forced a smile and changed the topic. "I suppose you're not just here to check on my injuries, Mr. Damaris. Is there something else you'd like to talk to me about?" Jack sat opposite her and nodded. "You're right. There is." As an heir to a prominent family, Jack behaved exactly like one. Even when he was sitting down his back was straight, and he exuded an ascetic aura. Seeing that Jack was willing to change the topic, Roxanne heaved a sigh of relief. She put on a serious expression and gestured for him to continue talking. "Apart from your research institute, the Damaris family has also picked a few renowned doctors to take part in our collaboration. Would you like to meet them?" Roxanne was more than happy because she could meet more prominent figures in the medical industry. "It would be my honor," she answered unhesitatingly. Jack smiled in response. "Good. I'll let you know once we've decided on the time and place." Roxanne nodded. Jack then stood up to excuse himself after talking to her regarding the collaboration. The reason he was there that day was to invite Roxanne. Since he had already done that, there was no other reason for him to stay. As he left the office, he couldn't help but glance at the flowers again. I wonder who sent her those flowers. Roxanne's reaction moments before had definitely piqued his curiosity. After Jack left, Roxanne got up to look for a vase for the roses. When she saw the roses, the emotions she had worked so hard to suppress came flooding back again. With a slight frown, she went back to her desk with her mind in a mess. She then forced herself to focus on the information shown on the computer screen. However, she couldn't retain much information even after staring at the screen for a long time. When it was time to get off work, Roxanne went home right away as she didn't need to work overtime. At the office, she couldn't keep her mind off the roses on her desk. The more she looked at them, the more messed up her mind was. Upon arriving home and seeing that Lisa, Archie, and Benny weren't home yet, Roxanne decided to make dinner to clear her mind. The moment she was done making dinner, the door to the mansion opened. Roxanne put the dishes on the dining table and looked at the door with a smile. "Darlings!" Happiness shone in Archie's and Benny's eyes when they saw that she was home. "Mommy!" Lisa was surprised as well. "Why are you home so early today, Ms. Jarvis?" In the past, whenever Roxanne went to work, she would only reach home after the others. That day, however, not only did Roxanne get home earlier than them, but she had even made dinner. Roxanne smiled nonchalantly and said, "I was free today, so I came back first. Dinner is ready. Wash your hands and dig in while everything's still hot." "Okay." Archie and Benny ran to the bathroom to wash their hands. After that, they ran back to the dining table and took their seats. While eating, Archie and Benny thought about Roxanne's injury. "Mommy, how's your injury?" Roxanne smiled gently and answered, "I don't feel pain anymore. Once the scab is gone, I'll be good as new." Archie and Benny nodded in relief. A few seconds later, the boys asked, "Mommy, since you got off work so early, why didn't you go and fetch us?" Roxanne was taken aback. Her mind was filled with what Lucian had told her at noon. Hence, she didn't even think about fetching them. Besides, she had been trying to avoid Lucian and Estella. However, she couldn't possibly tell the boys that. After keeping mum for a few seconds, she came up with an excuse and said, "I haven't been to work in a long while, so I was rather drained after working for the whole day. That's why I didn't fetch you guys." "You guys don't blame me, right?" Archie and Benny immediately shook their heads. "It's all right, Mommy. You should come home and rest if you're tired." Roxanne heaved a sigh of relief and smiled at them. A while later, the boys cast her a cautious glance and asked, "Mommy, could you send us tomorrow morning, then?" It had been a long while since Roxanne had picked up or dropped off the boys. Hence, they were slightly saddened when they saw everyone else getting picked up and dropped off by their parents. Roxanne had thought that it was because of Estella that they asked that question. After seeing their expressions, however, she knew it was something else. "Could you guys tell me why?" Archie and Benny exchanged glances and uttered softly, "The other kids have their daddy and mommy to them up." The boys looked at Roxanne aggrievedly. Roxanne's heart broke, and she felt a lump in her throat. "I didn't expect them to be so sensitive." She composed herself and answered, "Okay. I'll send you guys tomorrow." Meanwhile, Lucian had wanted to go and fetch Estella after he got off work. However, Jonathan had called him and asked him out for a meal. Lucian had wanted to turn him down, but Jonathan had been talking to him about Roxanne for the past couple of days. "He might talk to me about her again tonight. Join Telegram group for fast update and novel query." With that in mind, Lucian said yes to him. After Lucian hung up the phone, he told Caden to fetch Estella, while he went to meet Jonathan. When he arrived, Jonathan was already waiting for him. Jonathan waved at him when he saw Lucian walking in. Lucian saw him and walked toward him. The moment Lucian sat down, Jonathan asked, "How was it? You didn't fight with Dr. Jarvis at noon, did you?" Upon hearing that, Lucian couldn't help but recall how Roxanne had rejected him at noon that day, and his expression turned solemn. Jonathan noticed the look on his face, so he asked, "Did it not go well? If Roxanne doesn't fancy me at all, she wouldn't have reacted that way when she heard what the server said, would she?" Lucian frowned. "The process wasn't pleasant, but I'm not too sure about the ending." Indeed, Lucian actually thought there was still hope for him when he saw her reaction. Jonathan was astonished. "It seems that he's satisfied with how it ended. What exactly happened at noon? Why do you say so?" Jonathan asked. Lucian glanced at him and gave him a summary of what had happened. Jonathan was even more surprised when they found out that Lucian had confessed his feelings to Roxanne despite having his flowers rejected by her. What was even more surprising was the fact that Roxanne had questioned Lucian's sincerity instead of shutting him out entirely. Although he wasn't there to witness the interaction, he thought Lucian might have a chance here and that he was getting better at pursuing women. After listening to what Lucian had to say, Jonathan sighed and answered, "That's good, then. I was worried you might drop the ball, so I've even come up with a backup plan. I think it could come in handy if you mess things up with Dr. Jarvis." After getting off the phone with Lucian that morning, Jonathan had taken the initiative to come up with a plan to back Lucian up in case things were to go south. Judging by how things went, I don't think Lucian needs the backup plan anymore. Well, Dr. Jarvis' attitude shows that there's still hope. At times like this, you mustn't give her the time to react. Jonathan cheered Lucian on. Lucian furrowed his brows when he heard that. "I'm still thinking about what to do next." As soon as he finished speaking, Jonathan mysteriously whipped out something from his pocket. In response, Lucian cast him a confused look. "Coincidentally, I got my hands on 2 concert tickets this morning." Jonathan passed him the tickets. "Go to a concert together and improve your relationship with her." Lucian raised his brows when he saw those 2 VIP concert tickets. "Why, thank you," Lucian uttered with a smile. "Well, I've already given you an idea. Now, it's up to you to come up with a plan to ask Dr. Jarvis out." In fact, Lucian had yet to think about that. When he heard those words, he went quiet for a while before grunting in response. Jonathan gave Lucian a few more ideas. And they both parted ways after realizing it was getting late. Lucian's gaze darkened when he exited the restaurant and glanced at the tickets. Although he could tell that Roxanne was slightly moved, he still had his doubts. "She didn't even accept my flowers. If I invite her to a concert, she'll surely reject me. What if I get Essie to ask her out? That might work. Roxanne has never said no to Essie." Holding that thought, Lucian quickly drove back to the Farwell residence. When he got home, Estella had just finished her dinner, and she was scribbling away as she sprawled on the table. Catalina was sitting right beside her. "Mr. Farwell," Catalina greeted politely when she saw Lucian walking in. After that, she stood up and let him take the seat next to Estella. Estella simply raised her head to glance at the entrance and greeted in her piping voice, "Daddy." Then she lowered her head to continue drawing. "Essie, do you want Ms. Jarvis to be your mommy?" Estella was stunned when she heard that. When she regained her senses, her eyes lit up, and she asked, "Daddy, are you serious?" Lucian nodded. "Have I ever lied to you?" Estella tilted her head in puzzlement and thought about it for a bit. After that, she smiled and shook her head. "Daddy has never lied to me." "But…" Estella looked at Lucian in bafflement. And asked, "Are you not marrying Ms. Pearson, Daddy?" Although Estella had never liked Aubrey, she knew about the marriage contract. Lucian had with the latter. Besides, ever since she could remember things, she could remember Aubrey putting on an act whenever Lucian was present. Ever since Roxanne got injured, Estella had only visited her once. Hence, her mood was getting worse by the day. She was rather moody that day because Archie and Benny had told her that Roxanne had recovered, and she had gone to the research institute. Estella had thought that Roxanne would go to the kindergarten to fetch Archie and Benny. However, she was disappointed when she saw Lissa picking them up. Ms. Estella has been rather moody ever since she got home, Catalina said when Lucian was walking over to them. Lucian merely nodded and told Catalina that she could leave. In fact, he noticed how moody Estella was the moment he got home. Only Roxanne can make Essie so emotional. Lucian quietly went up to Estella and sat next to her. He lowered his head to see Estella scribbling on a piece of paper. It seems that she doesn't even know what she wants to draw. Otherwise, why would she keep rubbing off the drawing after drawing 2 lines? Right then, Estella put down the pencil angrily and turned to Lucian. Daddy? Yes. Lucian met her eyes. Are you done with your work? Estella asked with a straight face. Lucian had told her he would bring her to visit Roxanne once he was done with his work. Lucian frowned and answered, I am, but before he could finish his sentence, Estella interrupted, bring me to see Ms. Jarvis, then. Now is not the time. Lucian patted her head. Estella pursed her lips in annoyance. I haven't seen Ms. Jarvis for so long. Essie, do you want Ms. Jarvis to be your mommy? Estella was stunned when she heard that. When she regained her senses, her eyes lit up, and she asked, Daddy, are you serious? Lucian nodded. Have I ever lied to you? Estella tilted her head in puzzlement and thought about it for a bit. After that, she smiled and shook her head. Daddy has never lied to me. When Lucian heard Estella mention Aubrey, his gaze darkened. No wonder Roxanne still wouldn't accept me. Even Essie knows about the entanglement I have with Aubrey. Surely, Roxanne is still bothered by it. No matter what, I must pick up my pace and get Mom to forget about Aubrey. Lucian pulled himself out of his reverie and asked in a deep voice, Do you like Ms. Pearson? Estella shook her head vigorously. Why on earth would I like that evil woman? She's only nice to me when Daddy is present. Whenever he wasn't around, she would pinch my arms and spank me. Lucian nodded and made a promise to Estella. I won't marry someone you don't like. Estella's eyes lit up once again. But if you want Ms. Jarvis to be your mommy, I'm going to need your help. Essie. Lucian shot Estella a meaningful look. Perplexed, Estella tilted her head. Daddy is already stable. Why does he need my help? Seeing that Estella was confused, Lucian helplessly patted her head and explained, There's some misunderstanding between Ms. Jarvis and me. Essie, help me clear up the misunderstanding. Okay. Knowing that she could make Roxanne her mother, Estella agreed to his suggestion at once. Okay. After that, Estella looked at Lucian in confusion. But what do I need to do to help? Lucian wasn't surprised by Estella's willingness to help. But Estella looked at Lucian in bafflement. And asked, Are you not marrying Ms. Pearson, Daddy? Although Estella had never liked Aubrey, she knew about the marriage contract. Lucian had with the latter. Besides, ever since she could remember things, she could remember Aubrey putting on an act whenever Lucian was present. He took out the concert tickets and put them on the table. Estella stared at the tickets curiously. What are these? Concert tickets. Help me give these to Archie and Benny, okay? Get them to pass the tickets to Ms. Jarvis so that we can go to the concert together. Since those were VIP tickets, they could bring their kids along, Estella was still baffled. Why are we going to a concert? Lucian was amused by Estella's innocence. He pinched her nose playfully and said, "You're still little, so you wouldn't know. Just do as I say, okay? Trust me. I'll marry Ms. Jarvis and make her your mommy." Estella nodded obediently when she heard that. "Okay. I'll definitely do as you say, Daddy." Although Estella didn't know what Lucian was up to, she knew she could trust him. "If Daddy says this will work, I'll listen to him. I want Ms. Jarvis to be my mommy. That way, I can see her, Archie, and Benny every day." Lucian patted her head and put the tickets into her school bag. "It's getting late. Go to bed, okay?" Having been told of the possibility of having Roxanne as her mother, Estella brightened up. She picked up her pencil happily and said, "I'll go to bed later." With that, she sprawled on the table and started drawing again. Lucian raised his brows and sat next to her quietly. What is she going to draw now? Estella drew two adults holding hands, and there were three kids standing next to them. At a glance, one could definitely tell who the people in the drawing were. "That's you, Daddy. Then, there's me, Ms. Jarvis, Archie, and Benny." Estella held up the drawing proudly. "We're a family." Right then, Lucian couldn't help but recall that Estella had drawn something similar before. "That time, I wasn't holding Roxanne's hand in the drawing. This time, we've indeed become a family." Lucian's lips curled into a smile when he noticed the difference in the drawings. Early the following day, after freshening herself up, Roxanne got out of the bedroom and saw Archie and Benny waiting at the door. "Mommy!" The boys' eyes lit up in excitement. They were in anticipation of Roxanne sending them to school, as it had been a while since she last did so. Thinking about Archie and Benny's conversation last night, Roxanne felt her heart soften. She lowered her gaze and patted their heads. "Hurry and head downstairs for breakfast. I'll send you boys to school later." The two nodded their heads vigorously. During breakfast, the boys were especially obedient. When they finished breakfast, Roxanne changed into another outfit and sent the boys to kindergarten. Arriving outside the kindergarten, Roxanne spotted many children with their parents at one glance. There are indeed many parents who send their kids to school. She recalled that she had asked the boys to follow Lisa because she had wanted to avoid Lucian some time ago. Archie and Benny must have been upset then. With that thought in mind, Roxanne looked apologetic. "Ms. Jarvis." Pippa exchanged some pleasantries with Roxanne upon seeing her send the boys to school. "It's been a long time. I heard from Archie and Benny that you hurt your foot. How is it now?" "Thank you for your concern, Ms. Ward. I'm almost completely healed." While the two women were engrossed in the conversation, Archie and Benny held Roxanne's hand tightly as they glanced around their surroundings in search of Estella. "Essie was looking forward to seeing Mommy come to fetch us yesterday. If Essie gets to see Mommy today, she'll surely be overjoyed." Nonetheless, there was still no sign of her after they searched high and low for a long time. At that moment, Roxanne noticed the boys' actions. Realization dawned on her that she might run into Lucian and Estella if she stayed any longer. "It's fine meeting Essie. But how am I supposed to face Lucian after yesterday's matter?" That made her want to stop talking and leave the venue immediately. But before she managed to say anything, she felt Archie and Benny tighten their grip on her hands. Roxanne's heart leaped to her throat, and she almost couldn't bring herself to turn her head around. Ms. Jarvis. Not too far away, Lucian's car had stealthily stopped by the roadside. The moment the car door opened, Estella hastily jumped out from the passenger seat and ran toward Roxanne without carrying her bag. Archie and Benny tugged Roxanne's hands and exclaimed, "Mommy! Essie is here!" Hearing the boys' voices, Roxanne, unable to act unconcerned about the situation any longer, whipped her head around and looked toward Estella. Coming into her vision was the young girl with excitement written all across her face. Behind, Lucian, with a small school bag in his hand, was strolling over while staring at Roxanne inquisitively. When the two pairs of eyes met, Roxanne blinked and retracted her gaze hastily. At this point, Estella had already run up to her and hugged her leg tight. "Ms. Jarvis, your feet," a look of worry washed over the young girl's face. Nonetheless, Roxanne's attention was on Lucian, as she could sense that the man was looking at her even from a distance away. Truthfully, she was slightly distracted that even the smile on her face looked forced when Estella showered her with concern. "I'm feeling much better now. You don't have to worry, Essie." Despite so, the young girl's gaze remained fixated on Roxanne's feet. Knowing that Estella was worried about her, Roxanne tried to squeeze out a smile and turn one round in a relaxed manner. At that moment, Lucian approached the group and looked at them quietly. When Archie and Benny saw his arrival, they shared a look and greeted him after some hesitation. "Good morning, Mr. Farwell." Lucian cocked his brows and reached out to pat the boys' heads. Roxanne had wanted to ignore Lucian's presence. But hearing Archie and Benny greet him, she figured it would be an unsightly behavior to continue to pretend not to see him when Pippa was around. With that in mind, Roxanne looked at the man and uttered placidly, "Mr. Farwell." Lucian turned his head and made eye contact with her. "What a surprise to see you sending Archie and Benny today when you've just recovered, Ms. Jarvis. I thought she'd hide from me again after the incident yesterday. That's why I got Essie to hand the tickets to Archie and Benny and, in turn, help pass them to her afterward. What a surprise to meet her again that soon, hey?" An odd look crept up Roxanne's face when she sensed the underlying meaning in the man's words. Nevertheless, she tried to stay composed and forced a smile on her face. "Ms. Jarvis." Estella suddenly tugged at her shirt sleeve. Perplexed, Roxanne lowered her head to look at the young girl. "Ms. Jarvis, let's go to a concert together," Estella invited warmly with an innocent look. She had entirely thrown the matter to the back of her head, as she was too thrilled to see Roxanne sending Archie and Benny to school just now. It was only after seeing Lucian did she remember her task at hand. "Look, Essie. I don't feel any pain at all." Only then did the young girl feel at ease and lift her head to flash Roxanne a sweet smile. Initially, she was supposed to pass the tickets to Archie and Benny according to Lucian's plan. However, she was eager to find out about Roxanne's answer since the latter was right before her. In contrast to the excited young girl, Roxanne was briefly astounded when she heard those words. Instinctively, she shot a glance at the man before her. "A concert? That can't possibly be Essie's suggestion. I'm sure she must be acting under Lucian's order. Throughout the conversation, Lucian had never shifted his eyes away from Roxanne. When met with her gaze, the man calmly explained, I happened to get 2 tickets yesterday. We can bring the kids along Satwell. I wonder if you are interested in it, Ms. Jarvis. It was just as she had expected. Though her mind was in a whirl, she turned down that invitation readily. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I don't have time for that. Then she looked at Estella apologetically. Essie, if you want to watch it, you can go with your daddy. Not expecting Roxanne to reject her so outrightly, the young girl turned to look at Lucian for help. However, the man stared at her and gestured that there was nothing he could do either and for her to try her best. Pouting, Estella shifted her gaze back to Roxanne and continued to tug her sleeve pitifully. I want to watch it with you, Ms. Jarvis. As much as Roxanne could not bring herself to see the young girl's pitiful appearance, she did not want to get involved and led by Lucian again. Regarding those words Lucian had said to her yesterday, she was, in fact, still in puzzlement and disbelief. Yet, even before she had enough time to gather her wits, he was asking her out to a concert. Deep down, Roxanne feared that she would grow more attached to the relationship. Ms. Jarvis, if you aren't going, then I won't be going too. As soon as Estella heard that, she lifted her hands aggrievedly to wipe off the tears on her face before raising her head with a smile. Roxanne was shocked to find that the young girl had really burst into tears. I'm sorry for making you sad. She bent down and caressed the girl's cheeks. Shaking her head earnestly, Estella then ran up to Lucian, pulled out the tickets from her school bag, and passed them to Roxanne. The woman, despite feeling conflicted, eventually accepted the tickets. Before she could utter a word, Estella's voice rang out again. Goodbye, Ms. Jarvis. The young girl was afraid that Roxanne would change her mind, and thus she quickly waved goodbye and headed into the kindergarten after passing her the tickets. See you at the concert. In response, Roxanne swallowed her words back down and gave Estella a slight nod. With that, the 3 children held hands and entered the kindergarten together, leaving Roxanne and Lucian alone at the entrance. As she lowered her eyes to look at the tickets in her grip, she could vividly feel the man's intense yet indiscernible gaze directed toward her from behind. A turmoil of emotions surged within her almost instantaneously. Estella lowered her head in disappointment. Looking from above, Roxanne could only see the young girl's fluffy hair and trembling shoulders. It was apparent she was silently sobbing with her head lowered. Roxanne felt her heart ache terribly at that sight. She shot Lucian a look, hoping that he would say something. Unexpectedly, he stood still, seemingly with no intention of speaking. Left with no choice, Roxanne could only agree to Estella's invitation. Don't cry, Essie. I'll go with you, all right. Agreeing to watch the concert with Essie means I'll have to spend time with Lucian again. Had it been the old Roxanne, she might have been able to persuade herself that she would only have to spend a little time with him. But frankly, she was a little scared after yesterday's incident. After all, she had no idea what Lucian would do or say at the concert. Ms. Jarvis. While she was lost in her thoughts, Lucian's voice sounded from behind her. Lucian raised his brows meaningfully as he uttered, Thank you for accepting the invitation. I'll pick you guys up on the day of the concert." A frown formed between Roxanne's brows as she replied without hesitation, "Don't bother. I'll bring Archie and Benny to the venue by myself. I shan't trouble you, Mr. Farwell." She figured the outsiders would view them as a family again if she accepted Lucian's suggestion to pick them up. She did not want others to have such misunderstandings again. She stared at the man in front of her, her nerves stretching tautly. She had even thought about how she would reject him if he continued to insist. Little did she expect that Lucian would be indifferent to her answer. "That's fine too. We'll see you guys at the entrance, then." Then he turned and left without waiting for Roxanne to respond. At that moment, Roxanne thought she saw a hint of smugness on his face, and she wondered if it was merely a figment of her imagination. It was until Lucian's car vanished within her line of sight that she snapped back to reality. "He must have planned everything so that I won't have any chance to reject him. I was still hesitating if I should go for the date, but his words swayed my attention to how I'm going to head over to the venue. In other words, I've made a silent acquiescence to attending the concert with him." That thought made Roxanne feel overwhelmed by frustration. Meanwhile, Lucian sped through the roads toward the office. Throughout that, Roxanne's expression from earlier flashed through his mind every so often. At the thought of how she was led by him earlier, the man wore a faint smile on his face. "It's the first time I've played such a trick on someone. I can't believe she actually fell for it so easily." Lucian began to look forward to the date. Roxanne stood outside the kindergarten for some time before she could recover from her trance. Putting away the tickets, she got into her car and headed back to the research institute. Just as she arrived at the office, Jack gave her a call. "The date has been decided, it's tonight. Is that fine with you?" Hearing those words, Roxanne, whose mind was still in a mess, was slightly taken aback. It took her some time before she recalled what Jack had said when he had come over yesterday. "We're probably going to meet those doctors we're collaborating with tonight." On the other end, after not getting an answer from her, Jack urged, "Ms. Jarvis? Is anything the matter? Is that not an appropriate timing?" Only then did Roxanne snap out of her thoughts. "It's nothing. I'm free. I'll arrive on time tonight." Though Jack found her reaction a little strange, he did not probe further since they were holding the conversation over the phone. He merely left her some reminders before concluding the call. Because of the incident that morning, Roxanne seemed to be absent-minded for the rest of the day. Later that afternoon, Roxanne ended work about 30 minutes earlier since she had the banquet to attend that night. Out of respect for the doctors, she wanted to return home to freshen herself up. Just as she was ready to leave her house since it was about time, she received a call from Larry. "Where are you?" Larry's voice sounded. The second the call connected, Roxanne was baffled. "At home." "What is it?" Larry chuckled. "I'll go and pick you up." Comprehension dawned on Roxanne after she heard his words. Larry is probably also one of the doctors we'll be working with this time. Recognizing that possibility, she pulled a smile and turned him down. "No need. I'll head over myself. See you at the banquet later." "Are you sure?" I heard from Mr. Damaris that you hurt your foot. Jack had casually mentioned it to him while they were discussing collaboration matters 2 days ago. Larry had intended to visit Roxanne, but he had not been able to make time for it. Learning that she would be attending the banquet that night as well, Larry thus proposed to pick her up, as he was afraid it would be inconvenient for her to move around with her injury. I've recovered. You don't have to worry, Larry. Hearing her response, Larry did not insist any further and agreed to it. By the time the call ended, it was almost time. Roxanne headed downstairs and drove toward the banquet venue. Larry and Jack were chatting away at the entrance of the venue after their arrival. When they saw Roxanne's appearance, they immediately halted their conversation and approached her with a warm smile. "Hello, Larry." "Hello, Mr. Damaris," greeted Roxanne with a smile. Jack nodded gently as a form of acknowledgement. On the other hand, Larry began a brief chat with her, possibly because he had not met her for some time. "I heard you hurt your foot. I wanted to visit you, but I couldn't find the time to do so." Unbothered by that, Roxanne smiled as she replied, "It's only a small injury. Besides, I've recovered now. I'll feel bad if my injury impedes your work." The two looked at each other and smiled. Standing at one side, Jack called out to them after seeing guests arriving one after the other. "Let's head inside first. Everyone's almost here." The two agreed and followed Jack into the banquet hall. As soon as the three stepped inside, everyone in the hall instantly directed their gazes toward them. Not many doctors were here at the event this time, but there were still slightly above a dozen. With one glance, Roxanne could recognize a few of them who had also attended the previous medical consultation with her. She hadn't met the others yet, but given that the Damaris family acknowledged them enough to work with them, they were certainly not to be trifled with. Thus, Roxanne smiled at the group politely to express her goodwill. "Who are these two, Mr. Damaris?" someone suddenly asked, standing up. "Will they also be working with us this time?" There was a hint of doubt in that person's voice. Although Roxanne had long grown accustomed to such skepticism, she still couldn't help but tense up immediately upon hearing that. They were now on Jack's turf, and she was worried about her credentials causing him unnecessary trouble. What if people lose their trust in the Damaris family because of us? At the thought of this, the woman's expression became increasingly meek. Yet, Jack turned to the person posing the question and said, "This is Dr. Jarvis, and this is Dr. Morrison. They'll be working with us too, so I hope you can all get along with each other." There were two reasons for the crowd's behavior. One was that Jack was the official host, and two was the stark contrast between Roxanne and Larry's age as compared to the rest of the attendees. As much as they had outstanding visuals and demeanor, what truly mattered in the traditional medical community was usually one's experience and qualifications. In any case, their attendance at the banquet was just simply jarring and odd. Hearing that, the crowd gasped and stared at both Roxanne and Larry dubiously, especially with regard to the woman. Noticing those looks of uncertainty, Jack turned to Roxanne and Larry, using his eyes to ask if he needed to explain on their behalf. The two merely smiled and shook their heads. Given that the other doctors were more senior, it was only normal for them to question those who were less experienced or well-known. A few words certainly weren't going to change their opinions. With that, Jack simply explained to the two, these are the doctors who were involved in the last medical consultation with the Damaris family. Some of them took part in consultations in other regions, so you may not have met them yet. Roxanne and Larry nodded. Well, now that everyone's here, let's all have a seat and begin our discussion, Jack announced, turning to the other doctors. The group readily agreed. Despite his young age, Jack sat at the head of the table, whereas the other doctors were to be seated next to him in the order of their qualifications. Roxanne and Larry walked to the seats across from Jack. Dr. Jarvis and Dr. Morrison, you guys sit over here, Jack suddenly called out to them when they were just about to take their seats. The crowd was instantly taken aback. Roxanne was about to turn Jack down, only to see the doctor next to him having already given up his own seat for her. Upon taking a closer look, she realized it was Daniel Hopp, a doctor who had taken part in the previous medical consultation with her and Larry. Not many doctors were here at the event this time, but there were still slightly above a dozen. With one glance, Roxanne could recognize a few of them who had also attended the previous medical consultation with her. She hadn't met the others yet, but given that the Damaris family acknowledged them enough to work with them, they were certainly not to be trifled with. Thus, Roxanne smiled at the group politely to express her goodwill. "Who are these two, Mr. Damaris?" someone suddenly asked, standing up. "Will they also be working with us this time?" There was a hint of doubt in that person's voice. Although Roxanne had long grown accustomed to such skepticism, she still couldn't help but tense up immediately upon hearing that. They were now on Jack's turf, and she was worried about her credentials causing him unnecessary trouble. What if people lose their trust in the Damaris family because of us? At the thought of this, the woman's expression became increasingly meek. Yet Jack turned to the person posing the question and said, "This is Dr. Jarvis, and this is Dr. Morrison. They'll be working with us too, so I hope you can all get along with each other." Hearing that, the crowd gasped and stared at both Roxanne and Larry dubiously, especially with regard to the woman. Noticing those looks of uncertainty, Jack turned to Roxanne and Larry, using his eyes to ask if he needed to explain on their behalf. Daniel spoke softly, but everyone at the table could hear him. They were struck with awe when they heard him ask Roxanne for guidance. The two merely smiled and shook their heads. Given that the other doctors were more senior, it was only normal for them to question those who were less experienced or well-known. A few words certainly weren't going to change their opinions. With that, Jack simply explained to the two, "These are the doctors who were involved in the last medical consultation with the Damaris family. Some of them took part in consultations in other regions, so you may not have met them yet." Roxanne and Larry nodded. "Well, now that everyone's here, let's all have a seat and begin our discussion," Jack announced, turning to the other doctors. The group readily agreed. Despite his young age, Jack sat at the head of the table, whereas the other doctors were to be seated next to him in the order of their qualifications. Roxanne and Larry walked to the seats across from Jack. "Dr. Jarvis and Dr. Morrison, you guys sit over here." Jack suddenly called out to them when they were just about to take their seats. The crowd was instantly taken aback. Roxanne was about to turn Jack down, only to see the doctor next to him having already given up his own seat for her. Upon taking a closer look, she realized it was Daniel Hopp, a doctor who had taken part in the previous medical consultation with her and Larry. Perhaps the other doctors weren't aware, but Daniel now knew how well versed the two were in the field of medicine, and so he accepted that they were indeed worthy of sitting next to Jack. The remaining group members were visibly perplexed, but seeing a doctor of such a high caliber as Daniel give up his seat, they could only make room for the two young practitioners. Roxanne and Larry exchanged glances. Realizing that they would only look ungrateful by rejecting Jack's offer, they walked toward him and sat to his left and right respectively under everyone's gazes. "I've looked into the acupuncture treatment you performed during the previous consultation, but there are some things about it that I still don't understand." The atmosphere of the banquet reached an all-time high thanks to Jack's speech, and all the attention was now on him. Even those who hadn't joined him and the other doctors previously had long heard rumors about how exceptional he was in both wisdom and elegance. There were some among the crowd who were initially unconvinced given how much younger Jack was compared to them, but they had still chosen to show up since he was a member of the Damaris family. Yet, they now finally began to let go of their preconceived judgments after hearing what he had to say. They also felt increasingly assured about the two young doctors sitting next to him. He doesn't look like the kind who'll let them sit next to him just because he's close to them. On another note, I apologize for my oversight. Allow me to reintroduce these two seated next to me. Jack's voice rang out again in the midst of the audience's puzzlement. Everyone's gazes then fell on Roxanne and Larry once more. The two of them eyed Jack instead, unsure of what he was about to say. The latter flashed them a smile before turning to the audience. "All of you seated here are basically taking part in the project initiated by my family's research institute. This lady next to me is Roxanne Jarvis. Dr. Jarvis is an exemplary student of Professor Harvey Lambert. She came back to Shania under his advice to manage VR Research Institute, and she'll also be one of the few working with the Damaris family this time around." Then, Jack began to introduce Larry. "I'm sure you've all heard of Dr. Larry Morrison. Would you be so kind as to spare me some time to talk about it after this banquet?" Daniel spoke softly, but everyone at the table could hear him. They were struck with awe when they heard him ask Roxanne for guidance. Not only is he the heir of the Morrison family, but he's also made great accomplishments in the field of medicine, and is known for this internationally. With his participation, we'll be receiving financial support from the Morrison family too. As soon as Jack's words fell, all the doubt in the crowd's eyes vanished and was now replaced with astonishment and veneration. While not many people had heard of Roxanne, Harvey was considered a legend. The fact that he had asked this student of his to manage a research institute on her own showed how highly he regarded her. That was also a testament to her abilities. As for Larry, most members of the audience had heard of him but had never had the chance to see him in person. No one had expected two youngsters who looked like they came from distinguished backgrounds to possess such capabilities. It's no wonder even Dr. Hop asked for her advice. Yet, Roxanne and Larry had no intention of showing off, and they remained humble in the face of all these elders. When Jack was done introducing them, the two stood up and addressed the crowd. "I hope we can all get along, and please feel free to correct us if we make any mistakes." The other doctors sighed in amazement at their modesty. "I had the privilege of working with them during the previous consultation, and I dare say that the future of medicine in Chinara sure looks promising with people like them around. As the person who had spent the longest time with Roxanne and Larry, Daniel couldn't help but rise and speak up for them in admiration. He crowd nodded in agreement. Dr. Jarvis, Dr. Morrison, please excuse my rudeness from before. I hope you won't take it to heart. Someone apologized. The two youngsters beamed. Not at all. We're young, so it's only natural that you have your doubts. More people began to express their amity toward Roxanne and Larry. It wasn't long before the ambience of the room grew harmonious and relaxed. Jack waited a while longer, and after seeing Roxanne and Larry return to their seats, he began to introduce the other doctors. Every figure here had some achievements in the medical field, so a mere mention of his or her was more than sufficient. Soon, everyone felt nothing but respect for one another, not to mention the anticipation of their upcoming collaboration. Now that official talks were out of the way, the audience moved to light-hearted topics, striking up conversations with those they were well acquainted with. Despite not being a fan of socializing, Jack took the lead and headed to the middle of the crowd with a wine glass in hand. Roxanne and Larry clinked glasses with all the elders there before returning to their seats. It looks like the collaboration will go well, Larry commented, grinning. Roxanne nodded in response and shot a glance at Jack, who was among the crowd. The man deserved all the credit for creating such a lovely atmosphere. I thought he was just a good doctor. I didn't think he'd make such a capable leader too. Then again, it's no surprise. If the future heir of the great Damaris family can't even control a crowd like this, there's no way old Mr. Damaris would ever approve of him. Just as everyone chatted away happily, the door to the banquet hall suddenly flew open. The crowd instinctively looked toward the entrance, only to watch a group of young, aristocratic women make their way in. The one in the lead wore a long, pure white off-shoulder fishtail dress. At a quick glance, one wouldn't be able to tell if she was a real classy lady or just trying to be one. Jack. What a coincidence, the woman greeted coyly, striding over to Jack. Indeed, Jessica, Jack replied with a polite smile. The Damaris family shared good relations with the Hightowers. Jessica Hightower, the eldest daughter of her family, was 2 years older than Jack. The two had been getting along fairly well in recent years. Even so, Jack was slightly displeased to see her barge in like this with her clique. This was a banquet for the Damaris family's future allies, after all. It was also an event held for official business. Hence, Jessica's arrival was rather untimely. Despite that, the man kept these thoughts to himself. This is, someone asked in confusion. Jack composed himself and introduced the woman nonchalantly, this is Jessica Hightower. She's the heiress of the Hightower family. With a grin, Jessica waved at the audience. I just so happened to be having a party with my girls next door and heard that Jack was here, so I thought I'd drop by to say hi. I hope I'm not being a bother. Seeing that she knew Jack and learning from their prior experience with Roxanne and Larry, the crowd broke into a wide smile, not daring to mistreat this woman. Suddenly, someone nudged Jessica, signaling her to look in Roxanne's direction. Jessica's face clouded over instantly. What is such a pretty girl like her doing here? And it looks like she's sitting right next to Jack too. If you're fine with it, can we join you? Jessica slowly looked away from Roxanne and smiled at the others. Upon hearing that, the people shared a look with each other. They were already done talking about the main topic, and the woman was close to Jack, so they could not possibly reject her. The people nodded at Jack to gesture to him that they did not mind. Seeing that, Jack had no choice but to agree to it. "Join us, then." He then asked the server to add another seat. Jessica headed straight for the space that Jack had made. Then, as if finally seeing Roxanne, she glanced at Roxanne with a shocked expression before turning to look at Jack in confusion. "Is this lady with you?" Jack nodded in affirmation. "This is Dr. Jarvis." Roxanne did not know what Jessica was thinking about. She thought Jessica was doubting her abilities like the other doctors, so she smiled and greeted. "You can just call me Dr. Jarvis." Jessica gave her a once-over. When she noticed Roxanne's exceptional appearance and thought about how Roxanne was in the same industry as Jack, as well as how Jack was friendly with her, a hint of unmoistly flashed past Jessica's eyes. Still, she gave Roxanne a faint smile and said, "You're impressive, Dr. Jarvis. You're young, but you're already working with the big shots in the medical world." Roxanne pressed her lips together and flashed Jessica a humble smile. "I'm just lucky." When the server brought a chair over, Jessica did not budge from between Roxanne's and Jack's seats. There was no telling if she was doing that intentionally or not. Roxanne did not think much about it as she stood up and moved her chair to give space for Jessica. Jessica curled her lips and took her seat beside Jack's without hesitation. She then raised her head to look at Jack, who was still chatting away with the others with admiration in her eyes. Jack did not notice the subtle happenings at the side. He was too preoccupied with toasting the other doctors. Jack has been outstanding since he was young, but due to the Damaris family's rules, he rarely interacts with girls. The only exception is me, who grew up with him, Jessica mentioned in deliberate nonchalance. However, Roxanne was the only one who could hear what she said. Confusion danced across Roxanne's mind when she heard the other woman's words. But still, for the sake of politeness, she smiled and replied, "You must be close to Mr. Damaris, then." Jessica turned to give her a look. Roxanne continued to smile at her sincerely. At the sight of that, Jessica furrowed her brows and continued dubiously, "How did you get to know Jack?" Roxanne confessed, "Old Mr. Queen recommended me to the Damaris family's medical consultation the other time, so I had the pleasure to aid the children with Mr. Damaris." Jessica's heart sank again when she heard that the Hightower family was also involved in the medical world, but the medical skills she had were not enough to gain her a chance to attend the medical consultation with Jack. Nevertheless, Jessica knew well the processes involved in the Damaris family's medical consultation. Therefore, she could imagine how close the two had been upon hearing Roxanne's answer. "Is that so? It seems that you're much more skillful than I thought if you could attend the medical consultation with Jack." Jessica praised unwillingly. "Jack must think well of you." Roxanne could sense something amiss, and for a moment, she did not know how to answer Jessica. No matter what she said in response to Jessica's words, it would seem as if her relationship with Jack was a romantically ambiguous one. Mr. Damaris surely isn't the only one who wanted her to join them. Roxanne had old Mr. Damaris' approval too, uttered Larry, who had been paying attention to their interaction. When he saw that Roxanne was stumped, At that, Jessica knitted her brows and turned to the side to look at him. She had already noticed the young man a while ago. He was outstanding, but she was not interested in him. Yet, to her surprise, the man had actually forced himself into her line of sight and even defended Roxanne. Jessica started, frowning. Larry introduced himself politely, I'm Larry Morrison. I'm just an ordinary doctor, so you don't need to remember me. Shock flitted past Jessica's eyes. Larry was the son of the Morrison family, and everyone within the circle would have heard about him. They knew that he was uninterested in his family's fortune and had established a place for himself in the medical world. It was rare to spot Larry in banquets in Harrington over the years. Therefore, it was Jessica's first time seeing him in person. She could not help but think that he lived up to his name. Even though he was the son of the Morrison family, he seemed calm and collected and not at all aggressive. Perhaps his many years of practicing medicine were what made him learn to keep his aggression away from his exterior. When Jessica came back to her senses, she promptly smiled and greeted Larry in return, "So you're Mr. Morrison. I've heard of you since a long time ago." Larry nodded. "If there's nothing else, Ms. Hightower, I'd like to have a chat with Dr. Jarvis." Before Jessica could respond to that, Larry had already turned to Roxanne. "Are you free, Dr. Jarvis? There are some things about medical practices that I'd like to discuss with you." Even Roxanne could not help but freeze for a moment. Although she knew that Larry was doing that to help her get out of her tough spot, it was the first time she had ever heard Larry speak to her in such a distant tone. Still, Roxanne managed to recollect herself quickly and smiled at Larry. "Okay." She then cast Jessica an apologetic look. "Excuse me, Ms. Hightower." Jessica could only give Roxanne a small smile before watching Roxanne walk over to sit down beside Larry. The moment Roxanne sat down, she breathed out a heavy sigh and gave Larry a grateful smile. In a soft voice, she said, "Thank you, Larry." Larry sighed as well. "Be careful in a while." Ms. Hightower seems to have misunderstood something. Roxanne nodded in agreement. She did not know what she had done to make Jessica develop those unnecessary misunderstandings, but Jessica already had those misunderstandings, and it was not something Roxanne could clarify swiftly in a few words. All she could do was tell Jack about it later so that the man could explain it to Jessica himself. When the other medical professionals saw Roxanne and Larry sitting together, they quickly crowded over to discuss questions about medical practices. Both Larry and Roxanne were well established in the medical world, and both had come back from overseas. Although the two of them to keep a low profile in their discussion, the things they said still piqued most people's interest. At the same time, the other doctors were willingly imparting their own experiences to the two. The people became closer after a discussion. The doctors found themselves admiring Roxanne more and more. Furthermore, they, too, began approving of what Daniel had said at the beginning, that the future of the medical field in Shania was promising. Jessica's wariness toward Roxanne grew intense as she listened to the people sing Roxanne's praises. There had been no other women around Jack other than her for all these years. Even though she was 2 years older than Jack, Jessica was already thinking of herself as Jack's future wife until she encountered Roxanne. The more Jessica saw others compliment Roxanne, the more she couldn't stay seated. After scanning her surroundings and seeing that Jack was on the other side toasting to the doctors, Jessica filled a glass of wine for herself and walked over. "Jack, are you not done yet?" Jessica said as she walked over to Jack as if telling the others that he was hers. The women at the side cooed. Jack was in the middle of talking about professional matters with the others when he was suddenly interrupted by Jessica. Instantly, the smile on his face faded. "I still need a little longer. If you're bored, you can head back with the other girls first. Once I'm done, I'll come and visit you." It was a subtle way of asking her to leave. Displeasure rose in Jessica's heart. But she still smiled and moved closer to him. Then she raised her glass and looked at the other doctors at the table. "You're all Jack's seniors. As someone close to him, I have to give you a toast. Please allow me to do so." With that, Jessica downed the glass of wine. The entire time, she acted as if she was the lady of Jack's household. The doctors exchanged a look. Despite how baffled they felt, they still politely took a sip from their glasses. Jessica beamed with satisfaction and took the opportunity to stay by Jack's side. When the other women saw how intimate Jack and Jessica seemed, they cheered again. However, Jack realized that he could not continue after the interruption anymore. Hence, he said to the other doctors apologetically, "Let's talk about the details another day. It's getting late now. Let's head back earlier after the merry meal." The others agreed to it. Jack turned to glance at the person beside him and frowned. He then suppressed the displeasure in his heart and brought Jessica back to their seats. Just as he sat down in his seat, he noticed the changes at his table, and his frown deepened. "Why is Dr. Jarvis on the other side now?" Jack asked despite knowing the answer. Roxanne stiffened and subconsciously glimpsed at Jessica. Before she could say anything, Jessica uttered, "Mr. Morrison said that he had something to talk to Dr. Jarvis about, so Dr. Jarvis went over." Then, with deliberate generosity, she added, "Dr. Jarvis, I think Jack has something to say to you. Come over and sit here. I'll just sit at the side." Despite her words, she remained seated with no intention of standing up. Roxanne smiled. "I'm fine sitting here. I get to chat with my seniors better here." However, Jack furrowed his brows and said, "Indeed, I have something to talk to Dr. Jarvis about." "Jessica, I'll have to trouble you to move." Jessica had interrupted his event without regard to the situation, and Jack had tolerated her actions twice. He was not going to let her do as she pleased anymore. Both Roxanne and Jessica were taken aback by his words. In fact, Jessica had never thought that Jack would actually drive her away. On the other hand, Roxanne was frozen in her spot because she could sense that Jack was trying to use her as an excuse to get rid of Jessica. For a moment, the atmosphere in the room became tense. Jack turned to Jessica, who was still sitting beside him, expressionlessly. The moment her eyes met with his, Jessica gritted her teeth and stood up to give up the seat to Roxanne. Roxanne had no choice but to walk over. "Mr. Damaris, what do you want to say to me?" Roxanne asked after taking a seat beside him. She genuinely did not want to cause a scene, and Jessica, who was beside her, was staring at her. If Jack could not come out with any topic, Roxanne was certain that Jessica's stare would burn a hole in her. Jack knew well what kind of situation she was in, so he said casually, "I'll be relying on both you and Mr. Morrison for this collaboration, so let me express my thanks first." With that, he raised his glass and downed it. Roxanne lifted her glass politely and took a few sips as well. "Jessica, where did that woman come from? Why does it seem that Mr. Damaris thinks of her as someone important? She's not in some kind of relationship with Mr. Damaris, right? She looks like someone who knows how to seduce men." The friends Jessica had brought along with her all grumbled about Roxanne and whispered their speculations to Jessica when they saw the way Jack treated Roxanne. Jessica already felt threatened by Roxanne, so when she heard her friends' flame-fanning comments, her frustration worsened. "It seems that you're quite the crucial person for this collaboration, Dr. Jarvis," Jessica said through gritted teeth and raised her glass. "I'll have to thank you on behalf of Jack, then. I hope you have a good time working with him." She lifted her head to down the drink, but Jack stopped her with a frown. "There's no need for this. Dr. Jarvis and I know each other, so I can thank her myself," uttered Jack as he stared at Jessica coldly. Jack could not claim that he did not know what was in Jessica's mind, but their families were on good terms, so he had never voiced anything out loud as he maintained a good relationship with her in public. However, Jack could not stand how Jessica was not reading the room at all anymore. Jessica could barely keep the smile on her face upon hearing Jack's words, and she paled. He once near them could hear what Jack was trying to imply, that Roxanne was closer to him. Jessica, in contrast, was nothing but a clown. As a matter of fact, Jessica's hand, which had been holding onto the glass of wine, froze mid-air when she heard Jack's words. An awkward silence ensued. Roxanne was caught between the two, and she could feel her head aching. In the end, Roxanne could not bear to watch Jessica's embarrassed look. She said, "At the end of the day, we'll all have to put in much effort for this collaboration since it's our work, so let's toast to that." Hearing that, the others agreed and raised their glass to drink. Jessica took the chance to take a sip before putting her glass back in its original spot. "It seems that you'll be getting right into business after this, so my friends and I will take our leave first." The pale-faced Jessica stood up. She then lowered her head to look at Roxanne. "Dr. Jarvis, there's something I want to talk to you about. Do you mind sending us to the door?" Roxanne was perplexed by her question, but there was no reason for her to reject Jessica, so she stood up and followed them to the doorway. "Miss Hightower, what would you like to talk about?" Jessica swept her gaze at the people at the table before turning back to Roxanne. Despite the smile on her face, her tone was cold. "Don't assume that I'll thank you for helping me out of the awkward situation just now. I'm warning you now to stay away from Jack." Her words brought a frown to Roxanne's face. She had never expected to cross someone at a work-related banquet. Roxanne had been as friendly as she could be, but Jessica's animosity toward her had only increased. Sensing Jessica's animosity, Jessica pursed her lips and muttered, "I think you've misunderstood something. Only believe what I see, so it's best for you to remember what I've said." Before Roxanne could say anything else, Jessica turned and left. Exasperation washed over Roxanne, and she turned to return to her seat. "Sorry. Did I cause you any trouble?" Jack started apologetically when Roxanne sat down. I hope you won't use me as a shield if you encounter something like this next time. There are already some misunderstandings between Ms. Hightower and me. I think she and I have some misunderstandings too. Otherwise, she would not have acted as if she was his girlfriend earlier. If not for their families, Jack would have confronted her about the matter a long time ago. Still, don't worry about this. I'll clarify things with her once I get back. I won't let her trouble you anymore, Jack added after a short moment of contemplation. Roxanne nodded. She was not too fazed by the matter. She did not know why, but she pitied Jack for meeting a woman like Jessica. However, the thought of Aubrey soon crossed her mind. Here, she had Jack to clarify things with Jessica, and it was not as if she was guilty in the first place. On the other hand, Aubrey still had her eyes on her. She was going to strike anytime, and Roxanne could only do so much to defend herself from Aubrey. Roxanne realized that perhaps she was the more pitiful one. A bitter look crept upon Roxanne's face without her knowledge. What's the matter? Is there something else? Jack asked, puzzled. Roxanne snapped back to her senses and shrugged her emotions away before flashing Jack a smile. It's nothing. I just find what happened today a little funny. Jack apologized to her again. Without Jessica and her group of women, the atmosphere in the room was much more relaxed. After having their meal in peace, everyone went back home. Roxanne and the other two had been forced to drink quite a bit by their seniors, so they could not drive themselves back. While Larry and Jack summoned their drivers, Roxanne planned to hail a cab home. The three of them went out of the hotel together. Roxanne, let me send you home. I don't think you can hail a cab at this time, Larry suggested. Roxanne gave him a smile. It's fine. I can head home myself. It's late, and it's convenient for you to fetch me back. Your parents will be worried if you reach home late. Larry sighed. I'm not a kid anymore, so why are they still worried about me? You, on the other hand, will have Archie and Benny worrying about you if you reach home late. The look in Roxanne's eyes turned tender when she thought about her children. At that moment, the warm lights by the hotel doorway shining on her gave her a gentler appearance. That was the sight Jack was greeted with when he turned to say something to them. He felt as if the sight of Roxanne had shot an arrow into his heart, and he could not help but gulp. In fact, he had even forgotten what he wanted to say to them. I'll just give them heads up later. It's late, so it's best for me not to trouble you, Larry, Roxanne rejected with a chuckle. Larry's gaze darkened. He knew that she would not be easily convinced, so he had no choice but to give up. I'll wait here with you for a while, then. It's late, and I'm worried about leaving you here alone. Roxanne assented with a smile. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.